Hey everybody, this is Chi-Whiz, and I'm just going to do a quick burn as a test of the new FireFly XL. And first thing I'm going to do is gather some wood. I'm out in my backyard, believe it or not, and what I'm looking for is wood like this that is out of the snow, and even though it's been kind of damp and snowy, is still dry. Okay, so I've collected some of this. So basically, it's wood that has not been lying on the ground, that even though we're only a day after some snow and some frozen rain, has had some chance to air dry a bit. And I'm out here with the FireFly XL, and I'm going to use the FlexPort with the titanium insert so that I can feed wood in through the port. And I've got a 1.3 liter Evernew pot pretty much filled to the brim with water. So that's got to be about 1.25 liters, or think of it as 5 cups, and that's what we're going to be heating up. So for a top-down burn, the first thing is to load the FireFly with wood, and then we'll be building a small fire on top of that to get everything started. So let's get the FireFly loaded up. Okay, so the first step in the process is to load some fairly thick sticks, maybe the size of my thumb, in the bottom of the stove. Not too tight, but not too loose either. And then I'm starting to put some smaller stuff on top of that. Okay, so I've got some small twigs. These are like maybe 1/4 of a pencil thick, and I've got a really small piece of cotton that has a little bit of paraffin in it, and I'm just going to light that just as a fire starter. You could use birch bark or what have you to do this, but this works well as a fire starter. So having started that, I'm just going to move that into the fire. And we're going to put our twigs on top just to get our fire going. So the concept here of a top lighting technique is that you build a small fire on top of your fuel in the stove, and as this burns and embers move down into the stove, it lights the wood that's below. So we're going to let this burn down a little bit more, and then we can start using the FlexPort to feed in longer wood into the fire. Okay, I think we've got our fire going well enough now that we can put our pot on top, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And we're getting to the point where we can also start to feed in wood through the port. So I'm going to go ahead and get some pieces in there. As those pieces start to catch, I'm going to go ahead and start a timer to see how long it takes this water to come to a boil. So I think you should be able to see that we're getting a relatively controlled burn. If you really wanted to use kind of the total chimney effect of the stove, you could use the open mesh on the bottom and you'd get a very strong chimney effect. But certainly with a little breeze coming in the FlexPort, we're getting plenty of fire. Okay, it's been about 5 minutes since we put the pot on. Let's take a look at what the action is in terms of heating our water. And we do have a lot of bubbles starting to form on the bottom, so the water is starting to heat up and there's some steam. It's about 38 degrees out here, so it's not too cold, but it's not too hot either, obviously. And it's a little hard to appreciate with the time-lapse photography, but I am moving the wood in as the ends burn off, and that's helping to keep the fire going nicely under my pot. I think the other thing you can appreciate at this point is how little smoke there is. Fire is burning nice and hot, and most of that is being applied well to the pot, which is going to be great. Okay, we're about 15 minutes now, and you can see that a lot of my wood that I was feeding in through the port has been used up, more than half. And let's check the status of our water. Well, I would say we got a nice rolling boil going, and that's pretty good for 5 cups of water. About 15-16 minutes after putting the pot on the fire. I just want to point out how much nice coals you still have in the stove. If you'd want to do any baking or any kind of simmering of a stew or anything, it'd be very easy to do that right about now. Okay, I've got the pot back on as if it were simmering, and we're just going to see how long this takes to burn down and what's left when we're done. Okay, it's been about 10 minutes, and it's probably not completely burned down, but I think it's enough we can see what we've got. One of the nice things about the FlexPort is at this stage of the stove, it's often cool enough that you can actually pick up the stove with the FlexPort door and move it without burning your hand. So I'm just going to dump out the ash and the snow, and you can see that the titanium insert came out with it, and there's the FireFly with the mesh in there. So we're back on the table, and what I wanted to show you is because the stove burns hot, like this is the titanium insert, so it's gotten anodized in the heat, but there's really no soot. I can rub my finger on it, and I'm really getting very little, almost nothing, little dusty soot. The stove itself on the outside really doesn't have soot. So particularly since you're going to handle the tabs, you're not going to get much soot on your hand. There is a little soot right at the top of the stove, so those are the spots to avoid. But as you're taking it apart, you're really not going to get much soot on your hands as long as you handle it kind of by the edges like that. So Okay, so these are the pieces of the stove taken apart. There's my right hand, pretty soot-free. There's my left hand, pretty soot-free. And if we were packing up the stove, all we would need to do is we would stack a piece on top here like so. Then we would put our wire mesh in and our titanium sheet in. And then we would be putting the other 2 pieces of the stove over top. And so again, you're not going to get too sooty doing that. And then this whole package would then just go into your 8mm Ziploc pouch. And again, you're not really touching anything with soot on it if you're careful. And so that's the soot-free way to pack up your FireFly XL. This is Chiwiz saying keep it light and enjoy your next cooking events out on the trail.